Yes, I am well aware this is going to be one of the stupidest videos I've ever made. Ever since the release of chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune, I have seen some of the funniest, most interesting, most creative, like well-efforted fan content I've ever seen for a video game, and the most popular of which has been this. Now, obviously, this all started as a joke with the Asgore running over Death's song. It just came from a joke theory where someone was like, hey, everyone's been so curious about what happened to this character December Holiday. What if Asgore just ran over her?
There's also one specific detail of this theory that I found, and I've looked through posts, videos, everything, and I have not seen a single person mention it, and it's driving me crazy! And you know what? Originally, I was gonna, like, sprinkle it in, like, near the end of the video, you know? But I decided I need to talk about this right now before we get into things. So, remember this at the end of the night fight, right after you fight them? This weird gray background. Does it look familiar to you? Because it totally should. Boom! Right before we actually fight Papyrus, we see this. And, you know, let's change the color just a teensy bit and line it up. And, oh yeah, it's a perfect match. You may ask yourself, where else in Deltarune or Undertale have we seen these patterns? Nowhere! So, all I'm saying is if this theory is somehow true, these two chuckle fucks are certainly involved, and I will explain exactly why, but just watch.
As stupid as this theory is, which, let's be clear, it's not a theory, it's mostly just a joke, there's like a 4% chance it could be true, partially because genius lesbian cishet man that he is, Toby Fox, would do something like this, I'm fairly certain, despite the obvious dark implications. And I do think as Deltarune continues to progress, we are going to go darker yet darker, and the real themes and purpose of the story will be revealed to us. I'm working on a much longer Deltarune theory video that delves into the deep psychological trauma hiding behind Deltarune's core, and as I was doing research, collecting info, screenshots, quotes, even things in the code of the game, I kept coming back to Asgore and just scratching my head, because something about this motherfucker does not add up. I'm gonna assume some people are clicking on this just because they've seen the meme, they've never played Undertale or Deltarune, so I'll fill you in very quickly. Deltarune is a parallel story to Undertale, and in it we see a lot of characters who are from Undertale, one of those being Asgore Dreamer. Instead of being king of the underground like in Undertale, in this game, he runs a flower shop where he sells flowers. Who could have guessed? There are also some characters that we don't see in Undertale, the most notable of which is a character named Noelle Holiday. We learn a bit more about her backstory and her lack of agency as a person, and it seems like that's due to the disappearance or death of her sister, December Holiday. No one really talks about deaths like at all, and it seems to be one of the most traumatic things that has ever happened in this town that we live in the game yet. And no one brings it up, never really seems to come up. The only person who ever even mentions December by name is Noelle. Now, in all likeliness, because there's a lot of like snow imagery in the game and Noelle seems to have some sort of weird infatuation with snow, December, Des, likely got lost in some sort of snowstorm, and Asgore, who was the former chief of police, called off the search for her in order to protect other people from dying or getting lost in the snowstorm, and was removed as chief of police for this mistake. But unfortunately for my free time and mental health, that prevents me from not overthinking about the realistic evidence of a video game goat man mowing down a teenager with an F-250. What is wrong with me? That part of me unfortunately knows that there is more to the story. I have to keep reminding myself that the tricky Tobster does everything intentionally. Here is some evidence for that. If you disagree, go argue with the wall. Originally here, I was going to show off like every single little intentional thing that was like foreshadowing for things that happened in later future Deltarune chapters, even things that happened in Undertale. I'll go into that more in the next video, but I think for the purpose of this video, the best way to really prove my point is just saying that Deltarune literally keeps track of every single minor decision that you make. Some of these decisions are as major as if you decide to go out of your way to kill one specific NPC and not other NPCs during the Snowgrave weird genocide route, or they're as minor as at the end of chapter 4, running all the way back after Susie learns the real ending of the prophecy and interacting with this invisible wall here, where you try to go back further into the dark world in chapter 4, yet someone's hand pushes you back. Yes, the game actually keeps a note of this, and every other single interaction you do. Toby Fox very meticulously puts little details in his game and goes out of the way to add things that are a bit of a pain in the ass. I think this is mostly done so when things happen in future Deltarune chapters, no one can fucking say that shit came out of nowhere. Toby Fox wants it to be clear that there were always signs of what happened, and that has been a thing that we've seen so far from chapters 3 and 4. Gerson's existence in chapter 4 is obviously very big proof of this. I mentioned earlier that Deltarune is a parallel story to Undertale. Again, argue with the wall if you disagree. In Undertale, Asgore is king of the underground, and he is seen by pretty much everybody except for Toriel as this super charming, nice guy. He also is a very intimidating being that is incredibly powerful. And this is backed up by his fight definitely being one of the most challenging in the game. And we learned in Undertale that in order to break the barrier that keeps all the monsters trapped underground, they need human souls to break the barrier, yada yada yada. Asgore, as we find out, has just been hoping that no humans ever fall down into the underground, because if they do, he knows that as king, as the protector of everybody, he's gonna have to be the one to kill the human and collect their soul. And as we learn from Undertale, Asgore is mostly a big softie and genuinely did not want to do any of the things he did and feels insane guilt for what he did, even making coffins for the fallen humans that fall down. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he is not prone to violence, probably not violent enough to you know, commit vehicular manslaughter. Now, in Deltarune, Asgore is kind of a broke loser, and he's also kind of a little partially creepily weird towards Toriel. He's hiding in bushes to meet her out after church. He's pretending to bump into her at the convenience store and makes this joke. Uses his own adopted child as a flower delivery method system. I don't think Asgore is like intentionally creepy. I think he just has this long yearning and love for Toriel and the family that he used to have, and there's a lot of dialogue in Undertale to support that he really misses what he had before the whole Chara thing happened. And there's a lot of dialogue that really reiterates that Asgore wants so desperately for things to go back to the way they were. This is actually a common theme of some of Deltarune's biggest antagonists, like Spamton and Tenna. Given that Deltarune has so many themes about fate and prophecies and not being able to change your fate, or perhaps if you try hard enough and go against the grain, you will be able to write a different story, that parallels really well with the character that we've seen from Asgore so far. But what exactly split up the Dreamer family to begin with? Well, we don't ever really get any concrete evidence as to what. Like in chapter 4, when you leave the church, he sees you hanging out with Susie, who is wearing his son's clothes, and doesn't even ask why, doesn't ask who this Susie character is, just says, "Oh, hi, I see you have your friend here, bye my child," and just fucks off. When Chris has a very clear emotional breakdown where they kick the trash can 19 fucking times, Saul Goodman style, in the bathroom of Carol's house, Asgore's just like, "Hey, yo, bro, you good?" Like I said earlier, December is just barely mentioned throughout Hometown by anybody. It really does seem like people kind of want to cover up exactly what happened with her. What exactly happened with her? As we learned from reading some stuff around the town, Asgore used to be the chief of police. He was removed from the force, and the only, like, politician or anyone we know that would have the authority to make that power in the town is the mayor, who is, of course, Carol Holiday, who seems to be a more ice-cold, almost paranoid OCD politician. Definitely has a lot involved going on with the bunker, as we know that Undyne also seems like she has something going on. Here's my theory, though. We learned that the super secret evil spooky Gaster creepypasta bunker has 3 codes on it that seem like they are needed to enter. There's a symbol of the Deltarune, the symbol of a pine tree, gotta be referencing the Holiday family Christmas tree and whatnot, and an officer's badge. Now, we're led to believe that this is Undyne because she's currently the chief of police, and Alphys even confirms that Undyne was making trips to the bunker. But what if it wasn't Undyne making the trips to the bunker, it was Asgore? And it's very clear that he's working with Carol Holiday, or fucking her. I mean, that's what I thought when I streamed this game.
The fridge is packed with festive foods and a jar of pickles. Now, why are pickles important? Because of this random, incredibly easy to miss throwaway line in chapter 2. "You know what I want, Bone Man?" "Yep, free pickles." "Why, thank you. Can I ask, what kind of flowers do you think would make her remember how she felt before?" Maybe you should talk to your plants about that." "Well, have a good one." "Haha, I'm trying." I'm not even joking when I say this line and the thing I mentioned at the beginning of this video are literally the only way that I can possibly prove this theory to be true at all, but more on that in a bit. Back to what I was talking about earlier, we know that Asgore's relationship with Carol does stem from the past, as Carol, Rudy, Toriel, and Asgore were all friends in college and everything and seemed to have a pretty good relationship. Their kids were all friends, they all used to come over to the Dreamer household and watch movies and TV endlessly, as we know Tenna misses very desperately. But over the years, like a normal family does, their relationships started to just kind of drift apart, especially as the kids all got older. As we know from Tenna, it has been a long time since anyone from the Holiday family has been over to the Dreamer household. If we pay close attention to the Tenna flashback, we see that this all must have happened around the time that Des went missing and then Asgore and Toriel got divorced, basically directly implying that that is the reason that Toriel and Asgore separated. And it seems that now Carol has Asgore, you know, in some sort of indentured servitude program. He does cleaning for her at the house in order to, you know, pitch in and he can pay his bills and shit. But it seems like their relationship is going a bit deeper than that.
Also, when we arrive to the holiday household, Asgore is just already there, and it seems like he has been living there. He definitely has a key to Carol's room because it's locked when we get there, but when our soul's floating around in the vent and everything, we see all of this weird audio.
Dum-dee-dum. Phew, cleaning up sure works up an appetite. I wonder if the kitchen has any treats for me. No, not now. I can't afford to take a break. Now more than ever, I need to concentrate to settle this once and for all. We're almost there, aren't we, old friend? This time for sure, Tori will finally see what really happened. That I just wanted to protect everyone. And this time she'll have to believe me. They all will. Then, we'll all be a happy family again, won't we? It sure is beautiful, isn't it? This black shard. Obviously, the first thing to address about all of this audio is why the hell does Asgore have a black shard? And I do believe this singular piece of information is the most important thing we know about all Deltarune chapters going forward. No, I'm not joking. The only thing this directly confirms to us without any sort of speculation being needed, Asgore has encountered something from the Dark World or the Night specifically before the events of Chapter 4. And also, a lot of people think that Asgore is directly working with Carol or being manipulated by her, perhaps even blackmailed for some sort of horrible crime he committed. I'm not entirely 100% on board with this, but there's one very interesting detail to support that. So in the Weird Route version of Chapter 4, when Susie goes into December's room without you because you and Noelle never end up in there and she finds the guitar, takes it back to the main room to go write down the code and everything, Asgore interrupts her and starts talking to her out of nowhere, almost kind of seeming like he was trying to distract her before Carol got there. In chapters 1, you can find this note in Asgore's shop, basically telling him he's a broke loser and needs to pay his bills from someone named C. Obviously, we know that someone overseeing real estate in the town probably is a politician maybe or a business owner. It's Carol. If Asgore was already chief of police, he must have been pretty good at it beforehand to get this high. So I think he had to have fucked up massively to be removed as chief of police. Now, the common theory with all of the things with Snowgrave, the constant reminder of it being hard to see into the ice and the forbidden path started with ice magic, it definitely seems like December got lost in some sort of snowstorm, some sort of blizzard, and she either died or went missing. The things we learn about December Holiday: she's a rambunctious tomboy who smokes weed, wears flannel, plays a lot of instruments, and has interesting methods of disciplining Chris. And Noelle talks about how you guys used to explore in some sort of forest, which I don't know exactly where this forest would be. Deers constantly roam around in forests, and when people are driving through roads in forests, deers often get hit by cars when they're crossing the road. So what if alternately December wasn't lost in a snowstorm? There was no snowstorm. She just went exploring on her own one day, got hit by Asgore while he was driving his truck, which, by the way, is the only car we ever see parked out of a business in any part of hometown. It's a very notable distinction, except that one line, him saying that Toriel will have to believe him. He was just trying to protect everyone. There are so many parallels with characters having similar journeys, what they have in Undertale, and Asgore so far is the one I'm the most interested in. I mean, it's no coincidence that the mistake that seemingly tore his family apart in this game was the death of a child, like it is in Undertale. But what did he mean by he's just trying to protect everybody? Obviously, if there was some sort of snowstorm blizzard and there was a search party and everyone was looking for December, perhaps people started to get sick, people started to even get hurt. Maybe that's why Rudy's in the hospital. Maybe he got a real bad case of pneumonia and he's still in there for it. As we learned from some extra dialogue we've gotten throughout the years, Asgore and Rudy are very, very good friends, and Rudy doesn't seem to be upset with Asgore at all, even though there's definitely something going on with him and his ex-wife. So yeah, him trying to protect everyone by calling off the search in a dangerous blizzard makes sense. And unfortunately doesn't support the Asgore running over Death's theory. I just dropped my fucking phone. I've been working on this video for too long. It doesn't support the Asgore running over Death's theory, like, at all. So going forward, we kind of just have to assume that this isn't the case, and that something else happened to Des. It's important to bring up here that there is a theory kind of going around that perhaps Des is in fact not a good person. And I mean, yeah, they're not necessarily evil method of disciplining Chris supports that a little bit. The fact that almost no one in the town will mention her, but they'll talk about Noelle, or even Asriel, your older brother. Burger Underpants, who was like Asriel's best male friend, doesn't even mention December one singular time. And if you look at some of the lyrics and alternative lyrics for Raise Up Your Bat, which is confirmed to have been at least mostly written by December, it does support that she may have been someone like Chris who had some evil, dark, intrusive thoughts.
When the demon heart is crying and the blood is gushing bright, raise up your bat for the burning fight. When your hope is slowly dying and your future's lost its rise, raise up your bat and face the fright. Let's knock 'em dead into the night.
This is all to say, perhaps December was contacted by some sort of friend, some sort of creature, and was convinced to start opening dark fountains, because it seems like whatever someone's plan is, it involves the dark fountains being opened. Isn't it kind of interesting how, when you first get to the Dark World, or presumably the first time you've been to the Dark World in Chapter 1, it seems like everything kind of already has a history. Each time you go through one of the different Dark Worlds, all of the characters talk about the lives they lived there, the people they've seen, the relationships they've had. This could kind of just be another, like, storytelling like thing that Toby Fox is trying to put in the game, how when you do like a D&D campaign, you know, you come up with all this really cool lore that you're sure everyone's gonna care about to try and make the world feel more real and lived in. But it could also just be possible that December, and perhaps maybe Asriel and other people, used to explore these dark worlds before we ever did. I think this is the best explanation for why people think when you get to the very first Chapter 1 save point, it doesn't say the player saved file name, it says Chris, implying that Chris had already been to the Dark World. So, all of this loops back into Asgore. Why does he have the Black Shard? We know we got this from defeating the Knight, and it seems like Asgore is like looking through it, almost like he's infatuated with it, kind of in the same way that some of the secret bosses had an infatuation with the Shadow Crystal. But I think if this was supposed to imply that Asgore will end up being a secret boss in Chapter 5 and lose his mind and go crazy, oh, the Flower King trapped in Asylum, the Garden of Jealousy, everyone thinking the Chapter 5 Dark World will be inside of Asgore's shop, the Flower King, which I still think this is mostly true. I think Toby Fox would have specifically made it so that Asgore said this Shadow Crystal instead of this Black Shard, but no, I think the fact that he has a Black Shard specifically implies that Asgore fought the Knight and almost won. Or at least someone wielding the Knight's sword. Let's think about what we know about the properties of items transforming from the light world into the dark world. We find out that all of the swords we get are basically just pencils. Susie's axe is just a toothbrush. And these weapons aren't incredibly strong inherently, it just kind of allows us to do our basic attacks. But what if you took an actual incredibly strong weapon like, oh, I don't know, a fucking katana, and that allowed you to just do crazy shit like Genji ult in the dark world? Perhaps December was exploring around in this forest, opening some dark fountains around the town, and you know, she was like, I'll just take my mom's katana she uses to cut the Christmas hams or whatever, which is every fucking day in this household, so kill me. And that's why the Knight is able to do all these crazy attacks and bullshit, because they have some sort of super strong weapon that they brought into the Dark World. And perhaps Asgore got in a confrontation with December, beat their ass, because if we're gonna go off of like power scaling people's strength of the Dark World to the Light World, like it seems like the moment Undyne gets there, she's already mastered her spear magic pretty well. And you know, Undyne seems pretty fucking strong. And if Asgore is supposed to be similar strength to what he is in Undertale, I imagine his powers in the Dark World would be incredibly formidable. I guess the question ultimately is, why would he have been investigating deaths? My only theory is that it was out of love for Asriel. Perhaps Asgore was turning into kind of the concerned father, or rather Toriel nudged Asgore along and said, hey, you should go check on Asriel. He's hanging around with that December girl a little too much. I think she's a bad influence. Asgore went journeying into this forest behind the graveyard that we've never gotten to see, fell into the Dark World, which, as we've seen from what happened to us and what happened to Noelle and Bridley in Chapter 2, seems like it's pretty easy just to accidentally slip into one of these dark fountains. And then Asgore learned of the prophecy and saw things that he was not supposed to see. This is what he meant when he said he was trying to protect everyone. Now, how does this lead into Asgore running over December with his truck? I have no idea. The only thing I can think of is that in like a desperate attempt to get December to stop the roaring once Asgore learned about the prophecy in the Dark Worlds, because I don't know if it's implied that any negative thing that happens with the roaring in the Dark World will affect the Light World, but it kind of seems like with the whole darkness covering all the light thing, kind of seems like Ralsei was implying that could be a possibility in future chapters. I personally think this would just be another case of Toby Fox taking inspiration from games that he loved when he was younger. The quote-unquote bad ending of Deltarune would be very similar to the ending of Mother 3. Anyways, like I was saying, maybe Asgore was like, well, I can't beat her in the Dark World. She understands the rules of this world better than me, so I'm just gonna fucking get her with my car. I'm very tired, if you can't tell. That is the only real way I could make this theory make sense. But then, how did Asgore cover it up with absolutely no one finding out about it? Perhaps he used his knowledge of the town and his skills as a cop to hide it as best he could, and just had December labeled missing, and Carol was like, wow, you went into this investigation for my daughter, and you found literally nothing. You're fucking fired from the force. Except, I just feel like this doesn't line up with the character we've seen from Asgore. I feel like he would have came clean about it at the very least if he even did this. So that's where the Dirty Brothers get involved. I brought up this dialogue specifically with Sans earlier to just iterate one singular point. I think prior to the events of chapter 2 at least, Asgore and Sans have known each other, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because when you first get to the town, Sans says that he's new here, he wants you to go talk to his brother who he has not ever named, and we have not seen his brother because he's also new and needs some friends. However, when Asgore talks to him, it seems like they have a pretty good understanding that Asgore really likes getting the free pickles from Sans' store. It also seems like this store has maybe been here for a while, but maybe Sans wasn't the one who owned it, I don't know. But it would make a lot of sense with how in Undertale and Snowden, Sans and Papyrus are said to have just kind of showed up one day. Everyone's always had the theory that Sans and Papyrus have a very strong relationship to Gaster because, you know, they're named after fonts. All the dialogue in Sans' genocide boss fight talks about timelines and experiments and everything, and Gaster's really the only other notable scientist in Undertale besides Alfie's doing weird-ass experiments. And again, the thing with Papyrus and the background I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So, here's how I cobble this all together. The Knight's true identity is an amalgamation of Des and Papyrus. Here's some evidence to support that. Boom. Assuming this is what Des would look like as a teenager, combine these two models, come on. I'm gonna assume that the Alfie's experiment she does in Undertale where she's experimenting with how determination affects monster souls and this big fucking machine was probably something that was left over from when Gaster was the royal scientist in Undertale and doing his experiments and everything, and I imagine that Alfie's just kind of took some of the things he was working on and expanded upon them, and that's where she created the amalgams, these fucked up abominations. And also, just listen to this little background vocal sound in Black Knife and the amalgam battle theme. Idea what Sans and Papyrus's true intentions are with the prophecy and everything. I honestly really don't think Papyrus is the Knight. However, if you want to make the Asgore running over Des theory true, I think it's very possible that Sans and Papyrus covered it up in some way directly, one way or another, either to help Asgore, help Carol Holiday, or help Dr. Gaster in whatever they're planning. Honestly, I'm not kind of sure which conspiracy to believe at this point. Maybe Asgore is being blackmailed by them. Maybe they're being blackmailed by this cat that everyone seems to think is evil. Maybe Burger Pants' real girlfriend is the main villain of Deltarune. Maybe the Kickstarter-funded Abomination's secret boss in Undertale based off fetish material will actually be the Knight. I don't fucking know, guys. I just made this video for fun. Look, there's a million other things I could go into to try and justify this theory. And hell, this is all based off a lot of assumptions that Papyrus is even in this fucking game. So far, there is no proof of that. Ultimately, I don't think Asgore ran over Des. However, we saw what happened with all the Woody friend inside me stuff, Toby Fox inserting that into the game because it became such a huge joke meme that people legitimately wanted to see come true in some sort of way. I would not be surprised if we at least saw a reference where Asgore says some sort of line of dialogue like, "I'm not allowed to drive out late anymore since that DUI." Just something like that. I think the only thing that is 1000% true is that we are going to learn something about Asgore in future chapters, and it's either going to make us feel really bad for him or make him feel like he's really bad. I think he definitely has some sort of dark, tragic involvement. I go into this a bit more in my next Deltarune video where I go into what I actually truly think Deltarune is about, its hidden message and hidden theme that I have not really seen propped up online, and I'm really excited for everyone to watch that. So yes, go ahead and subscribe if you want to see it early, join the Patreon. Honestly, I post the majority of my YouTube updates in my community Discord, but you can also follow my Twitter and my TikTok if you are a fan of insane shower thoughts and dry humor. I have worked on these videos for too long. I have a mental deficiency. I have a brain tumor. I've been Big Citrus.
And have a damn good one.